Hey everyone, my name is Rooster and welcome back to Mechabellum. In today's video, I'm going to go through my European weekend tournament run from last weekend, which I ended up winning. So we got back-to-back wins now, 2 weeks in a row. I am wearing a beanie because I haven't been feeling too well these past few days. And so, yeah, I'm trying to keep a bit warm, but it won't stop me from providing this commentary. What is going to happen is I'll be skipping round 1 and round 2 because I think those games were a little bit one-sided. They were the opponents that had the lowest MMR I faced, which is often the case with these. If you think that it's still interesting to go through those, please do let me know down below in the comments, and maybe for future videos I'll include them. But for now, we'll go through the final 4 games, starting with round number 3. Alright, and here we are. Now, having a look at my packs. Marksman spec here looks pretty decent. There's a Fire Badger spec as well. If I move myself a little bit over here, we can see that Arclight Steel Ball is a pretty solid one as well. Giant spec here is all right, but I really do like the chaff starts, and so you'll see me go for the Marksman spec instead. I think both this one and the Fire Badger one would have been just fine. Now, my opponent is Math is Might, and it doesn't show his badge, but he actually won the Asia Weekend tournament on the same day. So, yeah, we are facing the winner of one of the other weekend tournaments from that same day on round 3. Not an easy matchup by any means. I mean, this could have just been a final, right? This final-worthy opponent. He's starting with Aerial Spec Tarantula Spider, which is a really good matchup for me, I would say. I mean, the crawlers are a bit annoying, but that's why I have the double Arclight purchase. Storm Collars, at least, should be very nice here against these big spiders. You'll see me position symmetrically. Here I'm deciding to put Storm Collars on the outside. I do know Math also plays some aggro, but the more I've been playing, the more I feel like outside storms is actually completely fine against aggro, especially against like spiders, which is that little bit slower. Because even if he goes asymmetrical, it's not very easy to capitalize on the other side of the board, right? Like, even if he goes asymmetrical, he might win one side, but then you'll have to push into the other side, which takes a long time and gives the Stormcallers just a little bit extra time to DPS. In this case, though, he goes a little bit more standard with the spiders and the crawlers, which is even more beneficial to me. Now, the late crawlers which he purchased, right, he went for 5 packs of crawlers on round 1, are a little bit annoying as my Arclights are stuck on the spiders, but the storm crawlers are doing their job, and right side, which did have that additional pack of fangs, is going to be completely fine. Left side, sadly, is getting overrun by the remaining crawlers on that side, but we should be able to win this. I'll go double speed, and yeah, now it's just a waiting game. Going to have to take that tower down and then rotate to be able to finish off the remaining units from my opponent. And so round 1 goes our way. Now round number 2, I get access to my Marksman Specialist, level 3 marksman on the board, and we also get unit reinforcements, so lots of deployments this round. Typhoon, Phoenix, Farseer, and Fire Badger are offered. Phoenix here is a nice pick normally, but I do already have the marksman. That being said, I could just put the Phoenix on one side and the marksman on the other. That way I am pretty much set and I've got good DPS on both sides of the board. I think that's a completely fine play. Typhoon here, not really that great. I don't like it, particularly against this many crawlers, and I don't think it's very good against tarantulas either. Farseer is always solid. And Fire Badger, I mean, it's fine, but not the biggest of fans here. It would be fine, but I kind of like the versatility here of the Phoenixes and the Farseer as a DPS and also anti-air option, especially as my opponent is aerial spec. So for me, it's going to be either Phoenix or Farseer, and it ends up being the Farseer. This unit has a lot of power, especially when it shows up on round 2, and it'll keep being useful at least until the mid-game. And, you know, you generally don't need to do too much with Farseer. It's a unit that has a great amount of base stats. It has plenty of range. It shoots air. It shoots ground. It has decent DPS. You really don't need to do much with it. You don't need to tech it most of the time. If you do want to tech it, Electromagnetic Explosion is usually the most versatile and also incredibly cheap. So yeah, Just a very nice early game unit there. My opponent decides to go for Typhoons and is now going to transition out of their starting position and try to attack the left side of my board. Now, I was not expecting this at all. So yeah, he takes me a little bit by surprise here. Luckily, we do hedge in this case, and we have the marksman on the left and the Farseer on the right to try and help out. But with the amount of crawlers that were added, that is simply going to be a little bit too much for my lone Arclight to get rid of all of the chaff, and so left side will be crumbling. Lucky for me, the Stormcallers did a decent job of at least taking out one Typhoon before dying, but I think these crawlers might just be a little bit too much for me to deal with. We do get the tower debuff, and during debuff, the Stormcallers are actually going to do a pretty decent job at thinning the crawler wave. Fangs are helping out, and I managed to prevent a debuff while my crawlers managed to get a debuff of their own, and so the Farseer will clean things up. And even though that looked a bit scary, we do take round 2, dealing a pretty good amount of damage, sending my opponent down to 3,400 hit points. Round 3, redeployment here looks kind of tempting, as it seems like my opponent is going to be forcing onto the left side of the board. And, well, with the redeployment, I will be able to move some of these pieces around and match the aggression. I decided to move the Stormcaller here. I'm not sure if that was the right move. I think it's fine. The Stormcallers weren't necessarily doing all too much. They're pretty slow and they weren't getting tower debuff very fast. So I think it's fine to move them around. Farseer has a bit more threat onto the tower. It's faster as a unit and also just overall better at dealing with chaff. But I could have moved that as well. I think both options were fine. Opponent goes for shield airdrop and buys their first air unit, and so now we know that we're up against the comp known as Taiba Typhoon Boat. This was a very meta comp a couple of months ago, before the Typhoons got nerfed somewhat, and the boats as well, but it's still a very powerful comp, and boat is making a bit of a resurgence, so a very scary comp nonetheless. Another Typhoon added onto that side as well. I match with a Farseer of my own, but it looks like it's still going to be a little bit too much. Marksman here is a little caught up. It does manage to get rid of a Typhoon, but as debuff comes in, he too will fall. Farseer is making its way over, but will we be able to get this tower debuff? Math leveled his tower this turn, and I will definitely need that debuff to be able to win this. We do get the debuff, and so the boat will be going down, which is very nice. It did, however, pick up enough experience to level, and with only Fangs, Crawlers, and an Arclight remaining, I do not think we'll be able to get rid of these 3 Typhoons. And so sadly here, we just have to watch as our army is crumbling. Maybe we can get rid of one more Typhoon. We can, but the other 2 will survive. And so now our opponent strikes back on round 3. Round 4, we get Electromagnetic Impact, which looks pretty good for me here. Smoke Bomb, not terrible either, but I don't think it's going to benefit me all that much. My opponent is already so close to me anyway. Instead, I decided to go for the Electromagnetic Blast, or Impact rather, as I was expecting my opponent here to perhaps even click Barrier, which is usually the one tech that carries this type of comp. It is extremely hard to deal with in most scenarios. Getting those double barriers on these units, an absolute pain to deal with. So being able to Electromagnetic Blast all of it here is just fantastic for me. And you can see, oh, that is some value right there. I do decide to double shield, as the smoke looked very tempting for my opponent. He does decide to go for it, so I'll be very happy being able to block all of that, because dealing with that 2 turns in a row would have been, yeah, a problem for sure. Now here I decided to move my Farseer from the right to the left as well, so we're reinforcing the left even more, and I also decide to buy a Scorpion of my own to be able to deal with these Typhoons. Now, one thing that I did notice here is that I think my opponent mispositioned this. He put the Crawler in the deep corner and then added the Typhoon in front of it. Generally speaking, I would say you want to have it the other way around, because that way the Scorpion doesn't actually lock onto the Typhoon, right? even if you're protecting the crawlers inside of the bubble and the Scorpion will be hitting the bubble, it then doesn't keep or stay locked onto the Typhoon with the second shot, right? It's aiming at the crawlers, which buys a lot more time. Whereas here, the Scorpion is instantly locked onto the Typhoon, and so you can see what kind of effect that has. Obviously, there was also the electromagnetic impact that was involved there, but we get a massive turn, and now my opponent is down to 1500 hit points. Another shield airdrop shows up. The unit cards here are not that interesting. Absorption module could be fine. Can throw that onto a Scorpion, but honestly, not so sure if I want it here. I think shield airdrop would be fine, otherwise a skip okay as well. I do go for the shield airdrop. And you'll see me pick up double shot now. Nice thing about Scorpion is that it has about 12,000 damage, and the shields from the Typhoon only have 8,000 per level. So yeah, you can one-shot a Typhoon here as long as you're instantly locked onto it, and so that's why I mentioned these crawlers, right? If there was a crawler pack here, or even here, then the Scorpion would be distracted and at least not hitting the Typhoon. But in this scenario, it is instantly locked on. And my opponent realizes it, so decides to sell out. I'm not entirely sure that was the right decision. I think he could have just put another crawler here on the flank right next to the Scorpion. That way he would have distracted its first shot, and I think that would have bought him a lot of time. Instead, he sells out, does pick up the absorption module, levels the Overlord. I decide to go for a flank cheese, adding one of my... buying a Phoenix, adding it to the flank, and beacon it past the two towers. The nice thing here is I do have redeployment as well, so I can just retrieve that the turn after if I want to. And yeah, you can see me add another Scorpion to the board here. Opponent decides to go for Launcher Overload on his Overlords. And decides now to push into the right tower again. I did not necessarily predict this, so there's nothing there to really deal with this. However, I did put a missile down, which slows down his Overlords considerably. The Phoenixes get in, and we do manage to get a debuff. However, my opponent used a beacon to move to the right side, and so despite having a 9-second debuff there, I actually don't manage to get rid of that much of his army. Scorpions are just too slow there to be able to chase down these Typhoons, and so really it's mostly the Farseer occasionally shooting at the opponent's units. Opponent gets the debuff in return, but luckily this time around the Scorpions will at least be useful as frontline, and we do manage to get rid of those two new Overlords. Problem is, this level 2 Overlord does have that absorption module, and so it is just not taking any damage, keeps healing back to full after shooting the Scorpions and Farseers, and so despite the tower debuff there, I end up losing that round. Round 6, Steel Ball Production Line shows up, pretty good item for Giants, so that might be an option here for my opponent. Heavy Armor doesn't look too bad either, might just pick that up, I do. And so here I will just have to, well, move my pieces around a little bit and make sure that I can deal with this push that has now shown up on the right side of the board. Keep in mind that my opponent did not pick up redeployment, so it's not that easy for him to actually, like, move back to the left now. And to be honest, after he sold that flank, I feel pretty confident being able to deal with these units. I decide to move one of my Scorpions from the flank defense onto the right side now. I don't necessarily think I need that many Scorpions because I haven't seen him commit to Typhoons all that much. He does have the 2 here and both of them can level, which could be scary, but that's about it. And so here you'll see me elite recruit Mustangs with range to be able to defend the right side. I think Mustangs here is a great option to deal with these boats. They recently got nerfed in terms of hit points, so they're a little bit easier to kill now, and I think Mustangs will always be a requirement against these type of boat comps, mainly because of Mothership being a threat. And so here you'll see me try and push into the flank again. I was kind of calling, well, maybe, you know, he thinks I will sell this instantly and not defend adequately. He does put a Fang there and a missile, so doesn't work out, but I didn't really need that money anyway. So right side this time around looks very good. Opponent even sold out of one of the Typhoons that was ready to level and added a level 1 on the right side, but it just doesn't really manage to get things done. And I think here the awkward bit is that he's moving away his most powerful units again. So even though my units aren't doing too much on the left side, neither is he. And in that type of scenario, I managed to get rid of half of his army on the right side, and then now we get debuff, and yeah, we have no trouble killing that level 3 Overlord and just cleaning up the remaining Typhoon pack. And because of that, I think that's just going to be game. It is minus 67, just about. So this can be a very scary comp, but I think my opponent kind of got caught up in with having like too many ideas or not daring to double down. I think what makes Typhoon Boat oppressive is when you double down. You kind of have to just trust that this comp will come online at some point and be very hard to deal with. Selling out of the Typhoon there on the final round, even though it was ready to level. And even earlier, right? Putting the Crawler first in the deep corner and then adding the Typhoon in front of it. Usually it'll be the other way around. So Typhoon in the deep corner and then Crawler in front of it to protect it. He could have fixed it by adding a Crawler in the middle of the flank to distract that Scorpion. Making sure that I don't one-shot his Typhoon with the very first shot, right? And then moving away, even though I did win him the round, once I stabilize and I start building my symmetrical board, that doesn't work anymore. And so now he has, I mean, just look at this, right? Like he has this backline of chaff, but there's not that much in the front. This Typhoon here is just completely naked. It has nothing to protect it. And so the Scorpion just one-shots it. And then after that, the boats are at the mercy of the level 2 Mustangs. So what I think he should have done is just keep pushing on this side, right? Alternatively, he could have picked up redeployment, which he didn't. I think in this type of scenario, it can be good to pick up redeployments because it would have allowed him to move some of these heavily leveled, right, Overlords, Typhoons onto the other side and then try and build his comp over there. But you have to commit at some point, and so here it was just a little bit all over the place, and because of that, he loses too many hit points, and it's a quick 6-round win. So let's get into the next game, round number 4. All right, here we are. Now, in round 4, I face none other than Skay, who was my opponent in last week's EU Weekend Finals. So another very strong opponent here. Looking at these packs, we do have the new Missile Specialist, but I'm not a big fan of the low hit points and no chaff. So instead I decided to go for the Fortified Specialist. Has a good slab of hit points. You get some chaff, you get Tarantulas, which are one of my favorite units. And I'm very happy when I see that my opponent picked Sledges with Crawlers, because this is a good matchup for me. I do play aggro in this scenario, as it is kind of, well, my bread and butter. It's what I'm most comfortable with. And yeah, my opponent happens to be on the same side. Looks like we will be having a headbutt, which should be even better for me. In this scenario, you'll see me use the Fangs here at the front, and then I'm adding 2 Crawlers as well for my round 1 deployments. My opponent decides to buy an Arclight on the left, and then buy 1 more set of Crawlers. So 4 Crawlers on round 1 and 1 Arclight. Does position 1 Crawler all the way here in the left, which will be pushing towards my tower. And so I will be getting debuffed. But it might not matter as long as I can get rid of most of the Sledges and the Crawlers before that happens. Tarantulas are generally just a little bit too tanky for Sledges to deal with. And so yeah, here you can see that we do manage to get rid of most of his units. Even though we get debuffed, it won't be a problem. And what's even better is that as long as the Tarantulas don't die, I'm not giving over much XP whatsoever. Whereas all of my units manage to get as much experience as possible as we get a tower, we kill all of his units. And so round 1 is, well, about what we would expect. Very happy with the starting positions there. Round 2, we get mass-produced Overlord. My opponent is aerial spec. This can be very scary to deal with. Being able to just pump out all of these Overlords for only 300 is a real menace. And so, yeah, he does actually pick up that card. And you can see that he has unlocked it already. Redeployment here could be fine, but because we're in a headbutt scenario, I'm not sure how good it is. I could also just pick up the photon coating. It's not that expensive of an item, and in a headbutt scenario, you do get a lot of value out of the effect most of the time because you're straight into the engagement. You can see my opponent already purchased 1 boat as well. And so it looks to be a classic Overlord Sledgehammer build, at least for now. A very strong composition. I'd say it fits very well in the meta currently. Very, very strong. Boats have just been showing up again and again. So, scary thing to face. Now, I think I just skipped that turn. Didn't pick anything because I wanted to purchase another spider and also be able to afford a phoenix. So you see me add a phoenix here to my tarantulas because, again, I have to respect the fact that my opponent will likely be adding some air units to the board to have DPS and also just to punish me for not having any anti-air, at least on round 1. So we do add it, but sadly the boat is a little bit too strong. I also decided to add a tarantula in the shadow flank there to be able to deal with those crawlers that were gunning for my tower. And my opponent adds an arclight to the flank, which is a little bit annoying. So round 2 here, not going well at all. That Overlord is a real pain for me to deal with. And instantly, yeah, Skay showing the power there of aerial spec with the mass-produced Overlord card. Let's see, what does round 3 have in store for us? We still have to get the free units, which we will be getting this turn. Vulcan, Wasp, Typhoon, and Mustang. Now here, I pretty much instantly pick Mustang because I think it's a very strong unit. Again, I think against boats, it's one of the better ones that you can pick. It won't struggle against the mothership, and at level 3 it packs enough of a punch to be able to kill boats pretty quickly as well, especially with the fact that they are mass produced. Now keep in mind, my opponent is aerial spec, right? So even though normally you lose 20% attack, 20% HP on that card, he also has a bonus 13 on both of those stats. So really, these boats are not too far away from being normal boats without the aerial spec. So quite a scary thing. I decide to instantly give the Mustangs range because that's usually what makes the difference with this unit. If it doesn't have the range, it'll struggle. But with the range, it can be an absolute menace. And, well, that does mean I can't buy more Mustangs, but I still can afford a little bit more chaff. So I put some crawlers here in the corner to distract this Overlord from instantly locking onto my tarantulas. And I also add some crawlers to the flank here to be able to threaten the tower. Now, opponent decided to pick Typhoon, and so now I'm starting to be a little bit scared because Sledge Typhoon, I think, is I can maybe deal with, or not Sledge Typhoon, excuse me, Sledge Boat, I think I can deal with, but Typhoon Boat, I think, is an even stronger composition. And so yeah, luckily we do get some good debuffs, and thanks to the range on my Mustangs, they do manage to take out those level 2 Typhoons. Sadly, they don't quite level, but well, level 4 Mustang would perhaps have been quite insane on round 4. We do happen to get subsidized Mustang offered here, which might not be that bad considering I already ticked range, and I definitely do want more than 2, right? This card cost 100, so I need to at least purchase 2 Mustangs to make up for it, and I think I will probably want more than that. Missile Strike, though, a fantastic card against the Mustangs. And so here I was expecting the Missile Strike on my Mustangs, which is why I sold the the Phoenixes on that side because I didn't want him to kill the Phoenixes, but in hindsight, I don't think it was that good of a play, and I think I even end up forgetting to shield here, which is a bit painful. I do add another Phoenix into the middle to be able to deal with this Typhoon, and I instantly give it charge shots because I was expecting those barriers to come out, and while the Mustangs are fine against the boats, they are not necessarily the best against tanky units or big barriers, so I will need that extra power. Sadly though, this is a definite mistake. I should have put down a shield instantly there. So yeah, this doesn't look that great. Luckily, I do manage to get rid of the 2 shields, and with the 2 additional Mustangs, which I did pick Subsidized Mustang, I will be able to get rid of the Overlord in the middle. Sadly, the Arclight in the corner just about survives on 1 hit point and manages to get the debuff, which means that my Tarantula, which was doing well on the left side, will end up losing, I think, and so will my Mustangs in the middle. Not a great round for me. I definitely should have shielded. Maybe I wouldn't have won the round, but I might have saved myself some hit points there. Round 5, we get more free units. So round 3 and round 5, pretty quick after one another. Very high tempo game. Lots of free units being added early on. Fire Badger, Farseer, Melting Point, and Sabertooth. I decide to go for the Farseer here because it's the most versatile and it also does help against the boats. The other units don't really help that much, and I think I have good enough chaff clear here anyway. My opponent, however, goes for Fire Badgers. 2 level 2 Fire Badgers. Adds 1 onto the flank. I do get the level onto one of my Mustangs from last turn. I decide to add the Farseer in the middle because this is the scariest unit pack from my opponents, right? Level 2 Typhoon and potentially level 2 Overlord. And here my opponent goes for another tech on the Typhoons, opting to go for Mech Rage. So increasing the unit's movement speed by 4 and also boosting the attack of the Typhoons by 50%. Not necessarily something very common. I think usually you would see more Overlords being purchased, or at least maybe more chaff. I don't think the Typhoons necessarily need it, but against the amount of like Crawlers and Mustangs, it might not be that bad of a decision. Also keep in mind my opponent doesn't really have the most common techs on Overlord. Usually you will see either the full carry techs with range, Overlord, Mothership, and High Explosive. But here we have a range, Mothership, Overlord Artillery, and Photon Emission. And I definitely think that this setup is probably a little bit worse against this type of Mustang response. High Explosive with Overload certainly would have been much, much scarier for me to deal with. And I think that's probably why my opponent went for the Mech Rage. To be able to kind of chaff clear, right? Because Overlords don't necessarily like shooting at the smaller targets. But yeah, this turn is very successful, and we managed to strike back despite the power of the Typhoons there and the additional tech. Now, round 6, intensive training here doesn't look too bad. Might allow me to level up some more Mustangs, and getting them to level 2, especially like level 3, really, really nice. I have a level 4 Mustang here on the side now. I did add those Phoenixes last turn, so we have more charge shot to be able to break the shields a little bit quicker. I decided to add another Crawler here to the front line to make sure that this boat and this Typhoon don't instantly lock onto my Tarantula. And here you can see me going for mines. I didn't think I necessarily needed something like HE because there isn't that much chaff on the side of my opponent. Only 5 packs here on this side, which almost get insta-locked. And then, yeah, only the Crawler pack over here. And the reason I go for mines here is because I know they're kind of annoying to deal with, especially for Overlords, and I'm not sure Typhoons are that insane into them either. Either way, it'll allow me to kind of purchase more Tarantulas down the line, and yeah, be a real pest. Phoenixes here in the middle, though, are doing absolutely fantastic getting rid of those Typhoons so quickly. And, yeah, I don't really deal with this Fire Badger flank all that well. I think I put one Tarantula over there, but it should have been at least level 2 to be able to dispatch of those. And so we get debuffed at a horrible timing, and that does mean that round 6 will be going over to Ske. Sending us down to just above 2k. Round 7, Lightning Storm gets offered. I'm not happy seeing this card because it's definitely scary for me to deal with. When I'm in a headbutt situation like this, it's almost impossible for me to shield and keep the shields up for the entire duration of Lightning Storm. Because I'm so close to the line, it's likely my opponents will be shooting at the shields. And yeah, Lightning Storm is a nightmare for small units. So I'm still going to have to shield because you never know. But definitely not happy seeing that. I decided not to pick it because I don't think it's that good for me. Lightning Storm doesn't kill boats. And it also doesn't kill Typhoons. So I think I just have to cut my losses here, try to survive, and prove an economic advantage by not picking the card. I do decide to go for a flank just to try and regain some tempo. Maybe the debuff comes in at the right timing and allows me to, well, make sure that I don't lose as many hit points. But yeah, this is not a good spell for me to show up. Opponent goes for Replicate Crawler though, which I'm a little bit surprised about because I think my chaff clear is not bad by any means. I do level the Tarantula here on the side with the intensive training, but my opponent sells out of the Fire Badgers that were there, so that was a bit unnecessary maybe. The nice bit is that he does missile strike one of my Mustang packs and I do shield, so that's no problem at all. I think he probably should have tried to go for one of my Phoenix packs here. But yeah, I don't know. The Replicate here shouldn't be too much of a problem for us. But as you can see, the Typhoons are shooting at the shield, and so yeah. Goodbye, Mustangs. There they go. Luckily, I do manage to get the debuff, so that play works out. And despite getting stormed, I think we are favored now. Look at the charge shot damage there, almost one-shotting the level 2 boat. And the Tarantulas are doing great too. Just spawning those extra mines, being a nuisance. This Arclight is a bit annoying still. It manages to get another debuff, I think. It will. But, you know, I'm happy here that I managed to, well, weather the storm. Pun not intended. And not lose too many hit points. On what was a scary turn for sure. Now, my opponent is down to 1400, so getting within kill range. I don't have that many giants on the board, so it might take at least another 2 turns to win. And now, again, oh, just not great. Orbital Bombardment shows up after Storm, which is probably another really, really awful spell to show up because, well, I don't have tanky air units, right? Like, Overlords can tank that, Typhoons can tank that. They won't die if they get hit by an Orbital Bombardment. But level 1 Phoenixes, Mustangs, they will die to those Orbital Bombardments. So again here, a spell that I will have to try and shield and just hope to survive. Opponent decides to go for Mothership this turn, which is a little bit surprising, especially considering the Mustangs. But I guess any little bit of distraction helps. Keep in mind my opponent is loaning in this scenario. I decide to add another Tarantula to the flank here to create one, well, something to deal with this Arclight, and to create a little bit more extra late chaff, thanks to the spawning spider mines. Opponent very respectful there of the flank, deciding to add an Overlord to deal with the Phoenixes. Again, here I'm kind of calling a bluff, saying, well, maybe you don't defend it. But they do, so doesn't work a second time. In this scenario, by the way, I am also loaning, I am taking enhanced range, and this turn I decided to click aerial specialization because, well, my opponent is well invested into air units, so the aerial will work as I say that. Mustangs here get absolutely nuked once more, so there goes my highest level Mustang pack. Looks like we're not doing too bad, though. The aerial specialization definitely helps creating that prioritized target lock. And so at least we get rid of all of the overlords, which means that we'll save a lot of hit points there, not having the giants remain alive. I do get double debuffed, though, which is a long debuff timing. These do stack, and that means this round will not be going over to me. But with orbital bombardment, I mean, maybe that was kind of to be expected. Round 9. This time around, we do have electromagnetic impact, which is pretty good for me. Even if my opponent goes for photon emission, it will still deal good damage against the typhoon barriers. So yeah, that is an insta pickup for me. Laser sight, though, there is an argument to be made for that card. It is a fantastic item for high-level Mustangs. But yeah, I just want to get the value here and go for the electromagnetic impact. My opponent goes for it as well. And I decide to go for range on the Phoenixes now because, well, they were doing really fine up to now. Even without range, they were surviving for long enough to be able to get rid of most of the shields and typhoons, but now giving them range will allow them to stay alive a little bit easier. And, well, I have the money for it at this stage of the game. I do decide to purchase another Mustang and more Phoenixes onto the left side, as I'm happy with what I have on the right side, and I now can use the deployments to, well, expand the board and deal with whatever is coming in on the left. Opponent here, by the way, does not go for photon coating, so we will be disabling the chin guns. The mothership will go off at least the first time, but the wasps will lose their shield, and we do good damage against the barriers from the typhoon as well, which means it should be that much easier to win the middle. Now, obviously, on the right side, my opponent used the electromagnetic, so my Phoenixes lose their range, lose their bonus damage from the charge shot. And so right side is a little bit favored for Skay. But it looks like we're going to be just fine. These high-level Mustangs just instantly locking onto those overlords and getting rid of them. No problem. The Typhoons are still a bit scary. Much tankier, and we don't get that bonus damage. But yeah, right side here looking fine. And as we move into the other tower, we do get the debuff. And so we go and take the win on round 9. And now we go to round 10. This was quite a long game, and it could still go either way. It only takes, you know, one wrong round with a couple of overlords surviving, and at 1500 hit points, I will be dying. And so round 10, we get more free units: Marksman, Steel Ball, Rhino, and Melting Point offered. Opponent goes for the triple Rhino. And here I could go for Marksman with anti-air if I want to. But the question is, like, how good is it really? I decided to go for Steel Balls instead, hoping that those might provide some sort of distraction. And I knew that they were pretty good against Rhino as well. And obviously, like, Rhino with armor enhancement, which is what Skay goes for, was a play that I was considering from my opponent. I don't think it's that insane because I do have Phoenixes, but we'll see how it works out. He decides to put them all the way in the back, so hoping to get rid of some of these Phoenixes with charge shots, and then that way the Mustangs would get locked up onto the Rhinos. Missile Strike, by the way, is back off cooldown, and so these Phoenixes here, not positioned amazingly by me, I have to say. Probably should have spaced them a bit more so that this wouldn't happen. And so at this point, I'm mainly just focusing on creating more chaff. Pretty much of everything I need. At least in terms of, well, damage. steel balls, I did sell one of them, but the pack that is on the right side manages to lock onto one of the rhinos and get rid of it, so even though I wasn't expecting too much of these, they happen to be relatively useful. And the rhinos don't seem to be that much of a threat. My phoenixes survived for long enough, and so they do manage to kill those rhinos. However, left side is kind of crumbling, and it's, well, been that way for most of the game, right? It seems like my right side is a bit stronger, or my middle is a bit stronger, but the left side I haven't been able to put as many units. I've only really started answering that since a round or two ago. And so now it's just boats remaining alive. Will we have enough? It looks like we will not. 43 hit points remaining. And so it does end up going to round 11. We're starting to sweat here because, well, there is a point at which these overlords will start taking over. Simply by the fact of being giants, right? And there is a point at which these mid-sized units will start falling off. So I really don't want this to go another turn. We do happen to get electromagnetic blast. Both of us have to pick it up. Now my opponent in this case might decide to go for photon. He does, so we have fully teched overlords on the side of my opponent. I will have to shield again, but sadly I can't really protect my phoenixes. So yeah, that is going to be painful. And so what you'll see me do here is purchase some late phoenixes all the way in the back to try and avoid that EMP. At least I will be protecting my Mustangs. Opponent also decides to go for oil this turn. I just decide to use the EMP where it would hit the most Typhoon shields, because again, even though Photon does protect against the tech disabling effect, EMP also does damage to the barriers. And here I decide to go for loose formation. I have heard some people saying that loose isn't worth it anymore. I'm not exactly sure. I knew that previously it was a good tech against Typhoons because they have a tiny bit of splash, only 5 meters, and so the loose does tend to help where they don't hit as many crawlers when they target one. Steel balls, I do keep them because I saw they were useful last turn, which they are yet again. This Rhino, though, is not doing too poorly. Does manage to get in quite far. Left side, again, not looking great. This late crawler pack is causing trouble, which means that this tower will end up falling. How much can we do in this case? The fire is a little bit scary as well, but we get debuff, which means that my Mustangs get slowed, and maybe, just maybe, they will start turning. Ooh, they go through the fire, but they're level 6 with a haste module, so maybe with the extra speed, yes, they managed to get through unharmed. 1,571 hit points. It looks like I'll be just fine. Managing to get rid here of the overlords. Can we even win, though, is the question. Just a couple Mustangs remaining, and I think that'll be just enough. Phoenixes and 2 Mustangs remained alive, which means that we do finally take this game after 11 rounds. Very close game. I think my opponent, I mean, we did talk about this with the chat later on, and I think my opponent probably could have won if he went for something like Fortress with anti-air a bit earlier on, because obviously I was relying on the Phoenixes with charge shot quite a bit to be able to get rid of the Typhoons. The boats weren't that much of a problem for the Mustangs, but the Typhoons definitely would have been. So that was definitely a play. And then apart from that, I think he was going a bit too wide, right? This is a very symmetrical, balanced board. And again, I think this Typhoon boat comp lends itself better to overloading one side of the board. So just try and stack as many boats on top of one another, and then you could just overpower your opponent, get to the tower, and most of the time, a lot of your units will just remain alive, and then you get that second rotation of Mothership coming through with more Wasps being added. That probably would have been a better decision for my opponent. Either way, I was very happy with this win, and so it means that we move through, and next up is round number 5. Now, round number 5 is against none other than Blue Hair, one of 201's best players for a long time. Hasn't been playing as much as of late, I think, but is still a very strong player. And, well, has the stats to back it up. Goes for supply spec in this scenario with arc lights and steel balls. And I decide to go for, well, one of my favorite packs, which is going to be quick supply spiders, in this case paired with fangs. I really do like this pack because I think spiders especially shine when you manage to get 1 or 2 techs early on. And so with the early resource lead, it is much easier for me to get levels in, but still be able to get deployments or even get an early tech on my spiders. Now, steel balls versus spider theoretically should be steel ball favored, or at least steel balls I think are meant to be a spider counter because, well, it's a single unit with a lot of hit points, so much like Melter, that is generally speaking what steel balls excel against. But this matchup, honestly, playing it from both sides isn't that favored for steel balls, not as much as you would think at least. Especially in headbutt scenarios, you can kind of get away with tarantulas. As soon as you get HE, you just clear faster than the steel ball player does. And the HE also helps killing the steel balls much faster because you often will be hitting 2 steel balls rather than 1 because of the bonus splash. And so if the steel balls and tarantulas are same level, the tarantula tends to get ahead because it just has, well, more chaff, right? And just DPSs down the steel balls relatively efficiently. We do end up being in a bit of a crossfire here, both of us going aggro, but on different sides of the board. I was a little bit surprised about this because I know that Blue Hair, at least the last time I saw him play was in a phase where he was playing a lot of standard boards, at least at the start, putting his units further back, but now he's playing asymmetrical aggro closer to the line. But I think in this scenario, putting my units together is going to be the best option for me. If I split my units apart and try to be very symmetrical, I probably will have a bad time. But keeping the 2 tarantulas somewhat close together usually turns out fine. Now, round 2, we get unit reinforcements to choose from: Stormcaller, Firebadger, Mustang, and Sledgehammer. In this case, against Crawlers, Steel Balls, Arclight, Mustang don't seem that great. Sledgehammer, however, looks quite nice to be able to slow down the Steel Balls and provide a little bit of, well, respite from my Tarantulas as they need their techs and kind of need to get online. Opponent goes for the same thing, and here I get a lot of tempo because my opponent kind of overreacts to the fact that I'm on the other side of the board, right? I just sell out of my Tarantula because I think, well, I don't really have that much pressure onto your tower. Like, I am on the other side, but my spiders are pretty slow, my fangs are pretty slow, while your steel balls and crawlers are quite fast. So really, it's not going to be that easy for me to get your tower and do anything meaningful with it. So instead, I'm just going to match and try to fight your army head-on and prevent the tower from going down. So here you see me using the sledgehammers vertically to slow down the steel balls, protect my Tarantula, and I even go for a very early high explosive ammo. And you're going to see how good it is in this scenario. I mean, look at the splash. Like, that's already one steel ball down. My opponent does go for a crawler flank, but you can see that the Tarantula here is not... it's not doing bad at all. It clears the crawlers very efficiently. It's now splashing onto multiple steel balls at the same time. And so, even though I get debuffed, I got rid of all of the steel balls on that side. Keep in mind, again, my opponent does overreact on the left side. There's sledges over there. There is another pack of steel balls that's been added. And even though we got debuffed, this doesn't look too bad. We get a lot of tempo. My Tarantula that's been added this turn, and it has a high threshold for leveling up. 1,000 experience is quite a lot to level up to level 2, but we're already getting close to it. 796 now. For reference, sledgehammers recently got nerfed by 25% for their level 2 threshold, their experience threshold requirement, and they now too require 1,000. So it kind of tells you how high the threshold is for spiders, right? Now, sadly, I don't quite manage to level up, and the sledgehammers are a bit too much for me to deal with, but that's not a bad turn by any means. I did get debuffed there, And now you're just going to see me building onto the right side even more. Obviously, I was just gambling that my opponent wouldn't have the resources to buy a mobile beacon. But this turn, I am going to need to protect my tower a bit more. And so what you'll see me do is, well, add another Tarantula and a Fang onto the right side. I also decided to put down some missiles because I do know that Wasp Swarm was available. I decided to use it myself in the back line, and I put some crawlers here in front of his crawlers and take both of the tower buffs just to make sure that I win. My opponent doesn't go for it, so yeah, my crawlers do come out ahead. And, well, my opponent here, I really did not understand this. Went for double level 1 Mustangs all the way in the back. I don't know, I'm guessing it was as a response to the Wasp Swarm, but the thing about Wasps is that they beat level 1 Mustangs one-on-one. The Mustangs kind of need the range enhancement. So yeah, even though he tries to respect it, his tower still ends up going down. And now he's stuck with Mustangs against Tarantula, which I think is a really bad matchup. And is just going to create even more, well, small units for my Tarantulas to feed on. Speaking of which, both of them now level up. I decide to pick up the haste module. My opponent gets a laser sight, which is quite nice for Mustangs if he does want to go further into that. And now I'm just going to buy more spiders, because really, there's no reason for me to buy anything else currently. I do know that I'm taking a bit of a risk here, as my opponent doesn't have, well, I don't have any anti-air. My opponent didn't have any either, though, so maybe I'm fine. And I'm just willing to take a risk here. You know, if he goes for an air unit, then so be it. I just didn't really see him doing that. He could go boat, I guess, but I just had a feeling that he wasn't necessarily going to go for it. And so, yeah, take a bit of a risk going for more Tarantulas, just solidifying my board in terms of, well, chaff clear on all sides. And, well, it'll also allow me to start farming experience on my Tarantulas, which might make it easier for me to get other techs like spider mines, like range enhancement, that kind of thing. Opponent doesn't go for air units, so yeah, I guess correctly here. And it goes for Scorpion instead, which is another decision I didn't really understand. Obviously, it's good against the Sledgehammer, but I only have one pack of those, and he's also selling out of the Steel Balls, so really there's no reason for me to keep those on the board. I can just sell out of them. They were more of a tempo play, I got them for free. So yeah, I wasn't really sure about this. They are tanky, the Scorpions, so, you know, although my spiders are completely fine against the level 1 steel balls, they probably won't have the damage to get rid of those Scorpions. But I don't consider Scorpion to be a good counter to spiders. Especially when the mines come out, they get distracted a lot. And we managed to get rid of at least one Scorpion there, so really not bad at all. I do lose a missile, sadly, but, you know, that's just how it is. And we get another tower debuff. Tarantulas here are getting a little bit more experience, killing an Arclight, moving on to tower, and you see the flashing gold, which means that this Tarantula has got enough experience to level up. And now we're just waiting, basically, for all of these units to engage one another. I do have the debuff advantage, so maybe we'll get rid of a few more units. Looks like we got rid of a couple of sledges, but that's about it. And so now I'm just going to have to, well, choose something from these free units, which come in at a perfect timing, round 5, earliest possible round for the second rotation of free units. And it immediately offers what I was lacking. Anti-air and single target DPS. So the Phoenixes here are available. Marksman, though, looks pretty juicy as well. And Farseer is never really a bad option. But here I was immediately looking at Phoenix, but I take a little bit of time to think, because it was like, well, you know, Marksman is offered as well, and it is a counter down the line. But eventually I was like, wow, what am I really talking about, you know? What am I thinking about? Just take the Phoenixes, 2 blue Phoenixes, get the range. You can't really complain, can you? Opponent goes for Phoenix as well. But at least we have the advantage here with the immediate tech. I do pick up a 3rd pack of Phoenixes all the way in the back here to kind of work together with this late Tarantula on the left. And I also decided to put another late Crawler, so I do have some very good chaff waves. I think I really like the way my board is set up right now. Opponent goes for range on the Scorpions and adds another one to the board, so it seems like he's pretty committed to that idea. And he now beacons back his steel balls. Also, I do have range on the tarantulas now. One of my favorite 2-tech pairings, or 2-tech power spikes on any unit is range and HE tarantulas. I just love how fast they clear. I mean, just look at this. Oh, it's so satisfying seeing them just delete the crawlers, delete the Mustangs. Now here, I noticed that even though I do have good chaff waves, it seems like there's a bit of a gap in the middle there, which leads this Scorpion to lock onto my Tarantula pretty quickly. So I remember when I was streaming, I was saying like, okay, I need to add a crawler or something there to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But still, it's a really good round, and we get a lot of damage in, with many of our units surviving. And so now my opponent goes down to sub 2k hit points. Nano Repair shows up. This has been nerfed. It's a little bit more expensive now. Another Wasp Swarm shows up as well. And I mean, I could take up the Nano here. It's not too bad on a Tarantula, but they're not very high level, so I'm not sure if it's worth it, right? If I had like a level 3 or level 4 Tarantula, I would probably insta-pick it, but because they're only level 2, I'm sitting there like, well, is it that good? I don't know. My opponent does pick up the Nano Repair Kit, and I go for a Wasp Swarm. I think main reason here was that I thought, well, I am a little bit vulnerable to a Wasp Swarm in the back. I do have crawlers though, so usually the Wasps will just follow the crawlers and not go for towers. But, you know, let's just add these in. My opponent doesn't have great anti-Wasp units. He does have the Mustangs, but they still don't have range. So, not that scary. And it might just add a little bit of extra chaff to the board. Opponent instantly goes for Fortress AA though. Really not happy about those Phoenixes. And, well, the Nano Repair Kit is a fantastic item to pair with something like a Fortress. So, I don't hate this play. It should give him a good amount of tempo. Fortress AA is incredibly strong, especially against I mean, just look at this. One pack is instantly gone. And the thing is, the Fortresses get all of the experience from killing those units. And so, especially when you have leveled Phoenixes or something of the like, the Fortresses just level so incredibly quickly. The Wasps, though, are doing a great job there, distracting the Fortresses and making sure that not all of the salvos go towards my Phoenixes, which means that we do manage to get rid of those Fortresses the turn they come out. And we also get rid of his anti-air because of the range diff. 2 Phoenixes remain alive, which is very good for me because it means that I don't lose any hit points on the turn that my opponent goes for a very proactive play, right? He's showing that... oh, I just see that I am on the wrong side of the board. My bad. Oops. He shows his hand here by going for Fortress AA. And usually that is a very tempo-heavy play, and he expects to win off of that, and then hopefully close out the game within the next couple of turns, because, well, Fortresses do have some very strong counters, especially when he uses one of his techs for something like anti-air barrage. And so, the very common play here, this is a thing that happens a lot, where you go Phoenix, your opponent goes Forte A, and then you swap out a Phoenix into Melter. And so because I didn't lose any hit points, I actually have quite a bit of time to set this up. And even if my opponent wins the next round because of some remaining tempo, then, you know, I still have some rounds to work with to set up all of my melters. So this turn, I instantly buy 2 melters. I sell out of the Phoenix pack that got one shot last turn. And, yeah, I also pick up Underground Threat this turn to be able to have some late chaff. And I also have another Wasp Swarm available, which I use on the front lines to be able to distract this first salvo from the Fortresses and make sure that the Phoenixes I do have are somewhat useful, right? Because they do deal good damage. I mean, even last turn they were top on damage, dealing 86k, 77k respectively. I also pick up another tech on my Tarantulas here with the Spider Mines, and I have enough money to give the Melting Points range. And honestly, at this point, I kind of needed melters anyway. My opponent has the Nano Repair Kit, and yeah, you can see the Fortress instantly leveled up, which is often the case when you go anti-air. So, you know, even without anti-air, I don't think the Phoenixes would have had the necessary damage to take these out, and Melter is just the more logical play. We get good locks in the middle. Sadly, my Phoenixes there will end up dying. Left side is looking a little bit more dire as the Phoenixes are locked onto that spider. But I managed to lock onto all of the fortresses, get rid of those. The Melters are also a great unit against the Scorpions, by the way, so it's a bit of a 2-in-1 there. We get tower debuff on the right side. The spiders are surviving. The mines are spawning. And this Melter is just cleaning up the left side of the board in the meantime. So a very good round. And I take home round 7. Not enough to kill my opponent, though. Down to 452. And round 8. Barrier shows up. One of the better items, I think, for Melter or Vulcan. You will generally see that being put on either of those two giants. So I think that is what I should be going for here. I could also take additional deployment slot, but honestly, I didn't see myself taking that many more deployments. I think at this point, I'm probably just going to be focusing on the Melters. And yeah, Barrier is hard to pass up on when you're playing Melters, I think. So I do end up picking that up. I get the double levels on my Melters because it does make it that much easier to get rid of the fortresses and the Scorpions. Because even though the matchup is good, it still takes a little bit of time to kill them. And at level 2, it'll be twice as fast. And, well, that time might just mean that I do win the round. I am loaning at this point, so as my opponent, we get temp range. I add more Melters to the board on the left, as that was the side I was struggling with the most. Now, my opponent goes for 4 level 1 hackers with range, as he did pick up the additional deployment slot. Now, hackers are very good against tarantulas, especially when you have the mines, because you can hack the mines, and then the mines will run into my mines, or, you know, run into my units, explode, yada, yada, yada. It's just one of the biggest counters, probably, at least theoretically. I did think when I saw this that it was not going to work, because, well, they're level 1 hackers against level 3 spiders. Even though it is a good matchup, like, you still do need to hack the spiders, and level 1 hackers don't necessarily have the highest DPS. So I was a bit skeptical of this play, but we'll see how this works out. We are locked on here on the left side. Melter not quite locking onto the correct target. Okay, now it's found its mark. Probably need a Melter behind this tarantula. But now the Melter on the right with the barrier has found the correct target, and so all of the fortresses will be falling. Now you can see that these hackers are starting to get some stuff done, hacking some of these low health tarantulas. Another one going down now, which means that the Melter here will have to deal with it. And another Melter even here, it looks like, will be falling. And we see a couple of hacked spider mines making their way over. But luckily for me, because of the debuff timing, this mine over here not dealing as much damage to the tower. And so luckily I don't get debuffed. And we do manage to take round 8 and win round number 5 of the tournament. So that was actually looking scarier than I thought it would be. The level 1 hackers doing way more than I was expecting. But we do come out on ahead. And that means that we're going to go to the finals. Round number 6. And here we are. Now the finals is going to be against French player, Fair New Moth. And looking at my packs here. Okay, so what you have to keep in mind is that there's only a limited amount of packs in the game, right? You can't get the exact same pack. And so I wasn't seeing things like steel balls, which means that in this scenario, I decided to go for Farseer spec with fangs and sledges, thinking that my opponent might have some steel balls. I also know Fair New Moth does play some aggro, and I end up being correct here. Even though, well, Fair New Moth actually only had 1 steel ball pack, but that was kind of the idea behind the pack selection in this case. And either way, I think Farseer spec with Sledge Fang is pretty versatile, so even if my opponent had something different, I think I would have been just fine. But I'm very happy seeing this because I think this is well, probably the best matchup I could have had. I have an insane opener, and yeah, I go for the positioning that I like most whenever I have to face this, with the fangs, 5 squares in front of the tower and 2 squares to the inside, which will still pull the most outside of enemy units. And then I decide to put the sledgehammers next to those, and then 2 arc lights to help with the chaff clear on the inside. Opponent here, by the way, with the fangs and sledges, not my favorite pack. I really don't like this pairing because, well, steel balls are much faster than fangs, so it's often a bit of an awkward chaff and, well, tank sledge slash DPS carry matchup. Opponent goes for double arc light. I think he also could have gone for something like crawlers and tried to play that and maybe play for something like a wraith, but it's a little bit awkward either way. My opponent, by the way, is a missile specialist, and yeah, so we'll have to look out for that on round number 2. But round 1 here going about as expected. Even though my opponent is playing asymmetrically, this setup will be able to deal with that just fine, and I keep alive an Arclight, pretty much a whole Fang pack, and all of 1 Sledge pack. Now round 2, Power Spike for my opponent, double Missile Strike available. We also get Underground Threat, which is a little bit annoying to deal with and might just have to be picked up. Heavy Armor though, hard to pass up on, especially if you do have those Steel Balls. And then Photon Coating, I guess, is fine as well, but I think Heavy Armor is just generally a little bit better. Can also be, well, transitioned onto a different unit later on. Yeah, and Fairnew Moth here making the decision that he wants the value of the Heavy Armor instead of the instant power of the Underground, and I decided to go for the other thing. I also think that Heavy Armor here wasn't that great for me, because, well, generally Steel Balls don't mind too much how tanky your unit is, so I think it's a little bit worse for me. And instead I decide to use this aggressively. And this is another very common thing I will do when I have this setup. If my opponent is playing asymmetrically, round 2, I'm expecting this beacon so that he doesn't get pulled and goes for my tower. And so you see me add a sledge here on the outside as well as a crawler. And the opponent here only using 1 of his missiles to hit some of my sledges and get rid of 1 of the Fang packs. But crawlers are invading the right side there of the enemy, so I will be getting my tower debuff shortly, and with the debuff I might just be able to deal with this advance. Keep in mind these sledges, or not sledges, the enemy Steel Balls are very tanky, almost level 2 worth of hit points, but thanks to the debuff it looks like we'll be just fine and able to deal with those. And what's very nice for me here is I'm managing to keep these Steel Balls from leveling. The scary thing about early leveled Steel Balls is that 1 pack can ruin your day and needs a very hard counter that often will cost you a lot of resources and then can eventually just be sold. But managing to keep the Steel Balls from leveling here means that I'm just able to deal with them without having to spend too many resources, right? So I keep an advantage and I kind of keep the ball on my side of the court, which is very nice. Now round 3 we get a bunch of reinforcements. Sabertooth here is a very high value pack, lots of deployments, lots of tankiness, lots of DPS. But not necessarily the best against Steel Balls. It often takes quite a long time for a Sabertooth to get rid of the whole pack. Phantom Ray, however, looks very nice. There are Phoenixes and Marksmen on the other side, but, I mean, level 3 Phantom Ray is hard to deal with. And I think it's a slightly better unit here against the Steel Balls, so I do decide to go for that. And honestly, I was kind of expecting my opponent to go for Sabertooth rather than the other two, because it's such a high tempo pack. And, well, Phantom Rays are obviously going to be good against more units that cannot shoot up. So you see me going for Phantom Ray, and I do decide to put them here on the left side to be able to deal with that heavy armor Steel Ball pack. Opponent spreading out the Sabertooth across the board here. Also keep in mind this is my Power Spike turn as I get my hands on a Farseer. An opponent, last second, instead of trying to move into the right side of my board, moving 1 of the Sabertooth here in front of the Arclight that was there. Or actually, I think I added this turn. And adding a crawler in the shadow flank. But yeah, this will have to spawn in for 2 seconds, and those level 3 Phantom Rays have plenty of DPS to make sure that it will not see the light of day this turn. So that gets dealt with instantly, which means that, well, my opponent loses out on some of the power of his free unit choice. And yeah, I mean, look at the power of these Phantom Rays, right? Able to kill those steel balls just fine. We also do use the oil this turn to slow down my opponent, as he is, well, fully committed to one side of the board, so I can just slow all of his units with the use of one spell. And this looks very powerful. Opponent did add a Phoenix to the board to try and deal with the potential Phoenix or Phantom Rays, but that's not going to be enough. And so round 3 goes in our favor, and our opponent is already down to 2,500 hit points, right? We didn't start with that many hit points. Usually I'm a bit apprehensive of these sub 4k hit point packs, because you can't afford to make many mistakes. And if you happen to make a wrong mistake, or your opponent gets a lot of tempo early on, it can be a nightmare to play. But here, it's going very smoothly. And I did leave enough space in front of the Arclight there to add a crawler pack, so honestly, the Sabertooth should not be a problem whatsoever. Both of us, by the way, picking up the Amp Core this turn. I do decide to put them on the Phantom Ray. This unit both has good DPS, but also has quite a good amount of hit points, so it definitely does benefit from those Amp Core stat boosts. And here, well, considering how poorly this looks for my opponent on the left side because of the oil and just, well, my whole setup is hard for him to get in. I was expecting my opponent to try and make something happen on the right side, because really that's the only thing I could see him, well, doing to win a round. And I happen to be correct, so you see me add a Farseer, 2 missiles, try and get rid of any chaff he might add to protect some units he adds, and then a second one to potentially slow down steel balls or whatever. I also do go for a Phantom Ray in the corner there, trying to get rid of that tower, because I know my opponent is under a lot of pressure, so usually when that happens, they don't really have the resources to be able to deal with all of these flanks that may or may not happen. And yeah, it's just a perfect moment for me to go for an aggressive play of my own. Missile here will get rid of the crawlers, which means that my Farseer will be able to lock on to the enemy Wraith that was added to the board. Fangs are making their way over, which means that this Saber, instead of locking onto the Farseer, locks onto the chaff. And, well, that is a perfect outcome for me, because otherwise I don't think I would have managed to get rid of that Wraith. But thanks to the debuff and the Fangs, I'm able to, and the Farseer will now turn its attention to the enemy Sabertooth. And that looks like another very convincing turn for us. Look at the amount of units left alive on the board. Keep in mind, these Farseer deal 300 damage a pop. The Phantoms deal 200. There's some sledges in there that deal the same. And yeah, opponents suddenly, round 4, down to 561 hit points. This is looking rough. This is looking very, very rough. Wasps here show up. Round 5, we get more unit reinforcements. And so, yeah, the game is even faster paced because of it. And I can definitely create some problems here for my opponent. So I decide to pick up the Wasps, because really my opponent doesn't have any units that can deal with that easily. Whereas I do have double Farseer. Phantom aren't the best at dealing with Wasp, but you know, they will help at least a little bit. And so here I just decide to go for the Gutshot play, pick up the Wasps, give them aerial specialization to beat the enemy Phoenixes and the Wraith, and just try and close things out this very turn. Opponent does have 1 missile strike available, but uses it to simply go for a Fang pack there. And I decide to go for even more tempo, pick up a Phantom Ray, put it on the front line there, and try to get in where I saw that there were no enemy units. Using the mobile beacon, also giving them stealth, which means that as long as they are not within range of something, they won't be able to get targeted. Opponent does go for range on the Wraith, so if the Wasps don't have anything in front of them, then the Wraith will win out. But with the crawlers added to this flank, I think I'll be just fine. I add more missiles as well. I decide to loan. My opponent doesn't. And yeah, I mean, I'm really going in for the kill here. Looks like the Phantoms do get in. but sadly they get stuck a little bit on the crawlers and the fangs. So it's not going to be a very quick debuff for me. That being said, I have a lot of wasps on one side of the board, and they do manage to overwhelm that wraith. We finally managed to get tower debuff, and because of that, I think that'll be just enough here to survive, end the game. Yeah, 2 Farseers alive would have been enough. They deal 300 damage a pop, and we have even more units left alive on top of that. And so round 5 win here in the finals of the EU Weekend Tournament, which means that we do pick up that badge. Very clean last game. Yeah, I just had a good matchup there. I was very happy when I saw what my opponent picked. Sledge Fang, double arc lights, this type of setup. Smooth sailing most of the time. Yeah, I got good packs as well. And then the cherry on top was just, well, I was reading my opponent correctly, right? I didn't get cheesed. My opponent went for the value play, taking the heavy armor there instead of the underground. And so, yeah, he got debuffed on repeat. I used the flanks to my advantage. And the combination of that just means that sometimes as the aggro player, it feels miserable to play. And it means that we take home the trophy. So, yeah. What did you think of these games? Did you like them? Would you like to see the other 2 games in a future video as well? Or do you think it's fine for me to just focus on the more competitive side of the tournament? Let me know. If you like the video, please leave a thumbs up. If you want to see me play live, do check me out on Twitch. And with that being said, take care, guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.